Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another podcast here on Inside Marketing. Really excited on this sunny day to be welcoming Modiara Kamps, who is the head of employer branding at Boston Consulting Group. So, welcome, Modiara. Really happy to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
It looks a lot sunnier where you are than where I am. You're in Spain, are you?
Yes, yes. At the moment I am, the weather is great. It's 34 degrees today, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. It's quite warm.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite that in the UK. Maybe 16, I think, which is basically the height of our summer. So we have to be grateful. But no, it's really lovely to have you. And I think, today we're going to go through some really interesting topics. Really exciting to kind of get your insight, working in the world of employer branding, and understand what that looks like in 2024 and what that's going to evolve into as the years kind of go on. So I'm really excited to get into it. I guess to start with, it would be great if you could tell us, yeah, a little bit about yourself, your role and kind of your experience up until this point, and maybe kind of take us through that journey to how you've got to where you are today.
Sure, yeah, no worries. So yeah, as you said, my name is Modiara, but I go for a lot of people. I go by Mo. Uh, Very boringly, I spent the whole of my career in the recruiting and branding industry. Uh, I don't
Nothing
even
boring
want to
about
mention. I don't
that.
feel old, but I also don't even want to mention how long I'm working in this industry. But I started as a recruiter consultant at an agency and then kind of like worked my way up through like in-house and an in-house recruiting manager, and everything was very nice and fun. But at one point I was like, I think I want to specialize in a part of let's say that recruiting process or that candidate journey, so to speak. And then I started to kind of like really dig into the employer branding element that the recruiting world has to offer. Um, and since then, I think my life, very cliche, has been about creating experiences that drives people to find a job they love.
Mm,
And I've done that mainly in, let's say, the tech industry. I worked at a tech scale up in the Netherlands since I'm Dutch, and then I moved to London and I did employer branding at Amazon, which was a huge volume gig, but also very interesting at the
yeah,
time to be part of a company that grows
yeah,
with that speed. And
yeah.
nowadays I'm at Boston Consulting Group, which is, I have a lot of people hopefully know it because then I'm doing a good job together with my colleagues.
Yeah.
But for the people that don't know, it's basically a strategic consulting company. We have around 35,000 employees, offices in more than like 100 plus cities, over 50 countries. And yeah, together with my colleagues and teams, we basically advise and empower other organizations to grow and to kind of build yeah, kind of like advantages and improve their processes, etc. So it's very interesting, I feel. And I'm
Yeah,
looking
very
after
interesting.
the MESA region. So I have
Okay.
uh, Europe, Middle East, Latin America, Africa, lots of different
Nice.
cultures. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you get to visit at all or
Yes, I mean, obviously with the sustainable hat on, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that that's
from time to time?
something to consider. But yes, from time to time, yes, I get to meet them,
Nice.
and I think it's always good because you get to learn different cultures if you're visiting a
Yeah.
country anyway. So yeah,
Yeah. And that's very important, I imagine, from an employer branding point of view.
yeah,
Interesting to get those different perspectives on it because that kind of looks different probably in different parts of the world. So I'm sure that
yes,
kind of presents a bit of a kaleidoscope of different ideas of what employer branding should be and should represent from different
yes,
parts of the world. So I imagine that's very interesting.
yeah,
But
for
yeah,
sure.
it's good, always good to get those insights. I mean, from an employer branding, it's interesting how you kind of your journey and that early stage, kind of going from recruitment more into employer branding, which now kind of fits more in that middle of the Venn diagram with marketing. I mean, do you
Yeah.
have like a formative moment where you I don't know, you started on that journey of employer branding? Were you working in a company and you started to really develop that for the company you were working with, or what do you think kind of attracted to you to it?
That's a good question. I think. it was more than just me wanting to kind of like go into a marketing direction. It was at the tech scale up at Amsterdam that I worked at the time. My like the executive board that I was advising into, they were really keen to be one of the top players in the local market. And I was like, yeah, guys, but listen, if we're gonna do this, like you want to hire people from Booking or Google or like other Infosys or like other big companies that are established in the Netherlands. Then I said, okay, but if you want to do that, we need to increase our visibility. And this was the time that employer branding, because it's relatively new, right? I mean, it's like probably 10 years around or something more like that, but that was relatively new. Now I'm feeling very old. But I basically just kind of figured out that we needed to increase our visibility, and one thing led to the other. And then, yeah,
Yeah.
uh, that whole kind of like marketing path opened
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah,
good.
amazing. And I guess you were kind of working it out for yourself, but probably driving some things that were pretty novel, really, for the company at that point. And where
Yeah.
did you start? Like, did you start on like different channels on LinkedIn? Was it more like social visibility? Like, where did you start for that?
So the company that I worked for, they were very focused on customers, as in creating customer journeys, or they
Okay.
did a lot of persona building. It was a company focused on retail and loyalty programs. So there was
Okay.
always an eye on, okay, what's the journey that this person is gonna go through if he goes to the store, and kind of like, how do we get visibility. So I basically took
Mm,
some of those insights and turned them into a candidate journey. And then I basically looked
okay.
at it and I said to myself, okay, because we have this in marketing, right? Like customer journey, all that stuff. It's like, okay, if you have a
Mm,
candidate journey, what do we currently do? What are our touch points, and how can we kind of like create this one in a more holistic approach? And two,
mm,
which are the moments that we then really need to invest in to make sure that these people are kind of like interested to apply. And that was from,
yeah.
let's say online marketing campaigns, like recruiting marketing
Mm,
campaigns, up to maybe organizing an event or building a community in Amsterdam at the time, focused on
mm,
women in tech, for example. So it was very broad, always with a holistic approach, just
mm.
trying to, and that's what I said in the beginning, trying to kind of create an experience or kind of like a path that for a lot of people that are applying for a job might not be visible, but
Yeah.
just trying to guide them somewhere. So that's how it
Yeah,
started, I think.
absolutely. Which is and that's why I think the crossover here is really interesting because it's so synonymous with any general marketing. That's all we're
Yeah.
trying to do. We're trying to encourage through a pathway, through a process, and keep engagement throughout the different stages of that process. So yes, it's a very very similar mindset. And now up into your role now, managing a large team and across multiple countries. But I wonder kind of what, if you could give us an insight into what's kind of happening now in that role. Like, what are you focusing on? Because I always find it interesting. There's always something that's kind of top of mind for somebody in their role, like a priority they're trying to push or a new concept they're trying to kind of get going within their team. What are you focusing on at the moment?
That's okay. I think when it comes to what we're focusing on is a little bit of both, right? As in, we have an external focus and we have an
Mm-hmm.
internal focus, wherein
Mm-hmm.
I think BCG historically has been a brand that people would love to kind of work for.
Yes.
So we receive a lot of applications, and it's relatively challenging to get in as our recruiting process is quite strict. Um, so what what I'm trying to focus on together with my team is basically to tailor that experience a little bit to make sure that the people that we want to kind of hire, that we want to engage with, are receiving the best journey as possible, but also trying to figure out how can we become visible within a target audience that is not directly interested or keen to come and work with us. Um,
Okay.
because as a consulting firm, we cover 21 different practice areas, which are 21 industries, which then leads
Yeah.
to hiring experts from all over the world. And
Yeah.
that's quite challenging if you look, for example, at an experienced hire that you try to pull in on board.
Mm,
Because these have been people that, I don't know, let's say, have been working in the climate and sustainability industry, have an academical background, but that would be super that we are super interested in as a consulting
Yeah.
firm to hire. But then try to explain to them, this is what consulting is, these are the benefits it can offer you. Like, you get to
Yeah.
work with a variety of clients. It's interesting because you have,
Mm.
the different perspectives. You work with a project team, and that, not having that background and trying to bring that across, that's, I think, one of our external focus points.
Yeah.
um
Interesting, really interesting, and kind of needing to drip feed that world of consulting, but in a sustainable way, but also in a way that kind of does magnetize them towards you. It's got to be appealing, but it's got to be the information at the right time, hasn't it? And you can't
yeah,
sort of start at the end of the process. You've got to put yourself in their shoes, understand what's going to make most sense to receive first, and then we'll
yeah,
drip feed a little bit more information.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I guess you're working in kind of a large team and then you're heading that up. So you've got kind of different people working across different channels and you're kind of the voice that unifies the strategy across those.
Well, yeah, that's a way of seeing it. I think, within my role, what I definitely try to do is, ensure a certain brand uniformity, if that's even a thing. But it's
Mm,
kind of like making sure that what we want to share globally is
mm,
localized in a manner, but then still
mm,
radiating the right message.
mm.
Yeah, balancing out all the different cultures, and then also connecting with that audience, as you're saying, at the right time. But maybe also with a different narrative. I feel that passive candidates, it's almost the difference between consumers. Like, if you have an active buyer or passive buyer, right? Like, there's a different
Yes.
approach. So that's what we also do for candidates. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically the external focus. And then I think internally, we try to kind of still, work as efficient as possible, try to,
Mm,
experiment with new tooling. I mean, yeah, it's probably a buzzword to say that we're also trying to implement or integrate AI within our business. But yeah, as a consulting firm, obviously it's a hot topic for us as a firm. But then
yeah.
I also feel that my team has to, work with it and, yeah, embrace
Yeah.
it as far as possible.
For sure. Yeah, we're in that kind of, well, I guess we feel like we're not in the experimental stage, but we definitely are. And I think everyone's kind of got this almost imposter syndrome that everyone else is fully up and running using AI and has it implemented,
Yes.
and we're the company that's behind. But actually, everyone I think is sat there thinking, oh, I should probably use AI for this, but I don't know how. So I think
Yes.
it's still definitely in like development. Just quickly before, and I know AI is a big topic for everything. Always gets raised on the podcast, and I know particularly in your industry, it's something that's interesting to discuss. So we will discuss that. But I wonder that you mentioned an interesting point across kind of different global markets for talent, adapting your strategy and keeping unification there, but also being flexible so that because there are different demands, and I wonder how different it becomes, like how much you have to bend or change your branding and your approach based on different cultures. That'd be really interesting to hear, or whether you find that kind of quite unified approach does work. Like how
Mhm.
much does it change?
Yeah, I think there are different layers of changes, right, in that approach. As in,
Mm,
it's almost like if you're buying your ideal persona, there's always, if you look at a company that's selling products, right, like there's always this ideal standardized buyer profile, right? That
yeah.
just has like a certain, maybe, I don't know, like location, other very
Mm,
standardized specifics. And then, you have another layer that you could also look at, as in like, what are their motivations or what are their challenges and how can you connect with that? And then if you go even deeper, you also talk about, okay, but how do they want to be approached? Like, maybe there's a generational difference, or maybe there's a cultural difference. And I think that that is exactly the same for recruiting, marketing, and employer branding activities, wherein we all have this profile. Okay, this is the type of person that we are looking for and that we are interested to hire. That's great. And then, as I just shared as well, like maybe for a grad student, it's a
yeah.
different motivation to join us, and they're already kind of like knocking at our door and be
Mm,
like, yay, can I work
mm,
here? Versus a more experienced profile, right? So they have a
yeah.
different motivation to connect with us. But then if you go even deeper, you have the cultural differences. Like, for example, I don't know, let's say Middle East, it's
Mm,
more based on my own experience, a high
yeah, yeah.
context culture. So it's very
Okay.
much more focused on, like relationship building, connecting with each other, word of
Yeah.
mouth. Yeah, just really kind of based on trust, more or less. Well,
Mm.
I don't know, if I would advertise in the Netherlands, and maybe I can say this because I'm a Dutchie, like Dutchies
Yeah.
are very direct, right? So
Mm.
we're basically skipping all the chit chat and just say, okay, yeah, great. So you want to hire me for this job. So what do I make and how many
Mm.
hours do I have to work? Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
well,
Yeah.
and I think that that kind of approach and that context that also really kind of changes per country and also is related to your advertising efforts in a way. So that also
Mm.
like influences the copy that you share, right? And I think that
Sure.
these are kind of local nuances and kind of little tweaks that we try to make within our go-to-market strategies when we work
Yeah.
with the local teams to make
Yeah.
sure that that we are really talking to them and not coming across as that big, you know, company, global company that is
Yeah.
just kind of like there. And I
Yeah.
also believe that, because we are across I think 100 plus countries, we have the diversity in house in a way. So
Of
it's
course.
not that we're trying to sell something that is not. But I think it's always an important to have the right balance in a way with the people that you try to attract and that are inside of the company and the other way around.
Yeah.
You don't want to. You have all these consultant memes on all the social media
Yeah.
channels, like the reels on what a consultant is like, etc.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, this is coming from a place where, yes, within consulting, you have a standardized way of working. Yes, we do work with PowerPoints, yes. But I also think that, there's a nuance in a way,
Yeah. Of
which I
course.
have experienced since I've been working here and I really enjoy it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I guess the where we win there because there are differences in the way to market and you pick up on that there and that's really interesting to think about. But I guess it's continuing to have an open-mindedness towards those because imagine, we an error that sometimes gets made, and it's not just to do with localization, to do with anything in employer branding and marketing, is when we kind of get a fixed view of who we're targeting and then we kind of just put the blinkers on and we go towards that. Actually, it's got to be a
Yeah.
two-way cycle where we are continuing to challenge what we always what we always put our strategy towards. So okay, we think at the moment people like this information in a direct way, but then are we testing that really well and are we checking, yeah, actually the data is kind of showing that actually they preferred this variant, which challenges what we thought about this market. And I think that's where we succeed in trusting our gut, but always testing it. And that's like the basis of all campaign success, isn't it, really? So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that really interesting. I guess you do that a lot, right? Kind of testing against different strategies in different countries and different times of year and things like that, and learning, and then feeding the learnings into
Yeah,
marketing.
and I think this is where it becomes very interesting because yes,
Mm,
I've always done a lot in my career based on data. I think, and
mm,
there's also because how I was raised, like as an ex-Amazonian, if you could say it like that, because they have really
of
strict,
course.
visions on, if it's not a data-driven answer, it's not really an answer. So you just basically have to
Yeah.
collect as much insight as possible and then you learn how to kind of like word this, etc. It doesn't really matter. But I've always kind of like learned, okay, if I want to make a strategical decision, I have to have data in my back pocket to
Mm,
basically share that as well. And marketing as an industry or as an expertise um, has been a little bit further developed when it comes to tracking and analytics versus,
yeah.
let's say, recruiting, marketing, and employer branding. I feel sometimes, like there's not one dashboard out there, and maybe this is a calling for somebody that basically,
Hello, somebody make it.
yeah, like that basically combines insights, from let's say
Mm,
social media channels and your career site and your social sentiment and social listening input, and your applicant tracking system. And I can continue, right? But there's almost no holistic way of approaching this. While that kind of like extends to when I connect with my peers in employer branding, we all have fabricated in-house solutions because we need to
yeah,
be able to measure the output of our efforts, and also
yeah,
when it comes to reporting to our stakeholders, because our stakeholders are not sales most of the times or commercial roles, right? Our
Yes.
stakeholders are hiring managers, in my case, then, partners as well. But they're
Yeah.
all people that don't have a direct relationship with recruiting. Or, yeah, we as employee branding, you kind of report in recruiting too, sometimes, right? Depending on where you are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
these are people that don't have a direct understanding, 50-50% chance,
Mm.
of that funnel principle. So besides kind of like trying to pull all the data, you
Yeah.
also have to be able to translate that in a
Yeah.
way that you can explain, okay, if I put this in on top, this comes out at the bottom, and that takes
Yeah.
some time. And I've been like throughout my career, I've had lots of conversations trying to explain, okay, it's preferably a proactive mechanism and not a reactive one, because the amount of people or kind of my senior stakeholders that reached out to me in the past saying, "Oh, help, my pipeline is not filled with enough applicants. Can you
Yes.
please support?" And then I'd be like, "Yeah, sure. When do you need them?" "Yes, I need them tomorrow." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have a
Yeah.
big red shiny button," because it's also about the positioning of employer branding within recruiting, right? Like
Of
in
course.
some situations, it's still seen as like equal to or an agency that you can put in or an
Right.
event that you can organize, or you do a recruiting marketing campaign, right? And obviously you can do all these things, but there's also a time and place to implement them, and that's not always, there. I think I don't want to go on like a huge
No, no.
rant.
No,
But
it's very
yeah,
interesting. Well,
yeah,
at least we've given somebody a business idea there with the dashboard, and I'm so with you on the dashboard. I am so data focused, and all I crave is all the numbers accurate in one place that I can just look at. And I think it's like in some way it's every marketer's dream, isn't it? Because that's what we
yeah,
need, and you kind of feel like you've got the blindfold on if you're making, like you said, about the kind of Amazon and your education into marketing. You've always had that feeling that unless I've got the numbers to back it up, I don't feel confident making the decision. And sometimes we
yeah,
have to test, and sometimes we have to kind of throw caution to the wind and have courage and try something that's new, because that's how we learn. But yeah, the data is so essential. And it's frustrating when we can't have it. And I completely understand. I mean, I had a conversation quite recently with somebody who's setting something up pretty advanced for this exact problem in marketing, because
yeah,
yes, I think I agree with you. There's definitely more development from a marketing perspective in terms of analytics, but it still could be improved. It's still not ideal. It's still not our haven. So
yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot of development going into really unifying that. Will we ever get there? I don't know. Will it always be not quite perfect so that we have that thing that we're reaching for? But yeah, it's very, very important. I'd love to know more about your Amazon days and how that formed you. I mean, I think it's a bit of a
Sure.
mystery for people, isn't it? The working life of Amazon. I mean, you've mentioned a little bit there about it being very data driven, and I wonder what other kind of things you took away from working there. What did it teach you?
Yeah, oh, that's actually quite cool that you ask. I think when I joined Amazon, they were going through hyper growth. So when I joined, the
Okay.
company had 500,000 people, and when I
Hmm.
left, they were with 2 million.
Wow.
So it was
Wow.
yeah, so it was huge, and together with the team that I worked in, we were looking after the EMEA region. So that
Okay.
was Middle East and Africa as well. And it
Sure.
was quite interesting because we had to focus on blue collar roles and then later on white collar roles. Um,
Okay.
but as you can imagine, for like the logistical part of Amazon and the warehouses and stuff, on one hand, they're obviously very much ahead when it comes to using the robotics. But at
Yeah.
that time, they were still also like hiring a lot of people, and that was then
Mm.
based on the volume and the orders that we were receiving too. So it was kind of always trying to balance, can we forecast the amount of hires that we
Right.
need for a specific location based on the order volume or the historical data? And then
Yeah.
based on that, how many people do we need to hire from which location? How much campaigns do we need to run, and what's then my cost per applicant? Because within
Yes.
marketing you have cost per lead, or I don't know, you call this differently,
Mm.
but You
Yeah.
get what I'm saying? And then basically
Mhm.
really kind of like calculate that through from like A to Z to
Mm.
figure out, okay, how do we spin all these plates and run enough campaigns to get all the people in? So I think
Yeah.
that that was interesting due to the fact that it was such a volume gig. Like
Well, and that, yeah, that's a
I
delight to be able to have such volume because that's sometimes something that we're struggling with, right? That we're like, "Oh, we think so, but our test sample that we're using to like make that
yeah,
conclusion
like
is
10
about
people,
10
50.
people,
Yeah,
20 people. It's not conclusive. So,
exactly.
in a way, a huge privilege to have such volume.
Yes,
Um,
and that also allows you to think further in a way, like all of a
mm,
sudden you're like, okay, so I have all these data points. What can I analyze more? And at one point we were brainstorming at the time, like, okay, could we potentially analyze a customer on Amazon, the platform, and if it would be a good fit based on what they're buying if we look at our own stuff,
wow,
right? Like
wow.
these are like that's a completely different. It's way more complex, and there's so many possibilities because of the
Mm,
data. I don't know if that
mm.
ever happened, right? So I'm not like disclaiming here, but it was just an interesting angle, I think. And other
Yeah.
I loved it as well because I was yeah, I was relatively young. I don't know. I felt young at least, and at the beginning of my career, and I had all these like basic principles that I'm still kind of grateful for today. I think it's a
Mhm.
bit creepy maybe to say it like that, but you have certain Amazonian ways on how to kind of make decisions. So, for example, you have this thing where they call it a revolving door or a two-way door decision, more or less, and it's basically
Okay.
meaning that you have the mandate to make a certain decision for a certain budget if it's a revolving door, so if you can come back. There are other principles that you follow when it comes to, for example, data collection, but also you don't use PowerPoints are not
Right.
allowed.
Interesting.
So, and
Really?
this is one of the principles that I really love. So you don't use PowerPoint. Now I'm in PowerPoint world, but this is a different story.
Yeah.
So you write white papers, and a white paper
Okay.
is basically a summary of maybe a 1 to 6 pager. You can Google this, it's super easy. And there are like certain basic principles on how to write it. So, you have acronyms, but also kind of like, ways of wording it. And then you have to kind of like write a decent amount of white papers to get the hang of it. But it's
Right. I
such a
see.
cool way of learning how to bring all information together in a one pager, and to bring that
Yeah.
across to a bigger group that everybody understands it. And how they then introduce it is that at the beginning of each meeting you get pre-read time. So you get 10
Oh,
minutes even though
interesting.
it's one page, and they give you that
Mm.
additional time and extra time because they want to make sure that you adapt based on learning agility, because with everybody it's different, right? So somebody reads this in like 3 minutes and then grabs a cup of coffee, but somebody else reads it for 5 minutes and writes down some questions. But
Mhm.
what happens is that during that meeting, if it's an hour meeting, you have a 50-minute in-depth discussion instead of
Yeah.
looking at a PowerPoint presentation for 30 minutes and then you're like, whoa,
Mm.
what is all this information? You're trying to process it. Other people are asking
Mm.
questions. Then you get other questions and you're like, oh, and then you can't
Yeah.
answer your questions. And then the call ends and you have to slack your colleague and you're like, I'm sorry, can I ask this other
Yeah.
question? Right? So
I didn't
I think it was like
understand. Yes.
super efficient in terms of decision making, and also being able to adjust to everybody within the team sizes. Yeah, I sound like a promoter for Amazon right now, but
Yeah.
the team sizes were also, up to like a certain amount, so that,
Mhm.
it's easier to make decisions. I loved all of those principles.
Yeah.
But equally here, I'm learning other ways of working that are also very valuable for me. But I think the
Mhm.
beauty of it is that I kind of like captured the non-PowerPoint way of working and the PowerPoint
Yes.
way of working, right?
Yeah, you've
So
shown the
yeah,
light. There is another way. Yes. And I
yeah,
think,
I'm trying. So when I
yeah,
joined, I basically said, no, I don't want to work with PowerPoints, but obviously I cannot not work with a PowerPoint. So I'm in
yeah,
it now. But
part of the
and this is
world.
also an
And
art, to write a good slide. Wow.
yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I love that. Considering fashion isn't art, that's something I could get on board with. The
No, honestly.
I think that the decision making that's so interesting. The meetings, the white paper, and I mean, I'm sure everybody listening can probably relate to that feeling of being in a PowerPoint, either being the one who's presenting or being the one who's tuning in, and it is difficult because you've got a set agenda and a set journey that you're taking people on. We can relate that. I mean, I'm sure in marketing that happens a lot because we design this journey we want to take people on, either through a report or
Yeah.
something like that. And actually we have so many questions, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about at the beginning, where there has to be a big education piece when we're presenting to stakeholders, because they don't really understand that funnel process. They don't really understand the whole holistic view of everything. So, yeah, love that idea of some pre-reading, and then everyone kind of can be more active in the conversation. Otherwise, it's very passive, isn't it? It can be. It can be very sort of trying to take
Yeah.
on the information, but without pre kind of warming up the brain to the information that we're about to receive. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's very interesting,
And I
and it
like it.
sounds
I like it as
exciting.
well if you can challenge, if you get challenged too in a
Yes,
way. Like
yeah.
if you're presenting some of these marketing metrics, I don't know, let's say engagement rate, like that if people
Mm,
say something
mm.
about it, like, hey, what does this actually mean? Or is this good or not? I don't know, like, or why is it higher there than there? Whatever, like just simple examples. But instead of
Yeah,
us running through all these slides saying, yeah, we did a great job. Look at our report. Yeah, okay, great. But
yeah.
what does this actually mean?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I think in marketing, and I think probably more generally, um, we really get too much information delivered to us, and really as marketers or as working in employer branding or anything, it's our job to take that whole big picture and really bring that down into something that is very small. And the useful things from a report are often just one or two little insights that we're going to go
Yeah.
and implement, so we don't have to show all the workings
No.
in how we got there. So yeah,
But
really like that
sometimes,
idea.
because it's your work, you want to show
Yeah,
all the effort that you put
yeah,
in.
of
So it's
course,
about
yeah,
balancing, like, okay, what do I actually
yeah.
bring across that is important for my stakeholder, and what do I want to
Mm.
display that might not add too much value? Maybe to your
Yes.
peer marketeers, yes, but you know,
Yeah, yeah. And often that's taking stuff out right at the last minute, I find, because it's almost that it's a process you have to go through to write everything down and to document the process in full, and then kind of leave it and then come back and look at it through a new lens and almost put yourself in their perspective and think, okay, cool. I know that's the process I followed, but what's actually going to be useful from
yeah,
that?
yeah,
So yeah. Oh, I love that. I love to, yeah, hear about that. And it's always really interesting to know the background of people and different experiences that you've had and what you've seen and thought, no, not going to take that forward, and what still stays with you kind of years later. So that's really
yeah.
interesting. You're still flying that flag, and are you still doing white papers? Do you still do the 10 minutes of pre-reading beforehand or not?
I wish, but no, I can't. But
Not anymore.
what I am trying to introduce is that pre-read, because I
Yeah,
also
okay,
like
yeah.
with slides as well. It's the same. Like as I said as well, like writing a good slide is also an art, because you
Mm,
also don't want to put in too much info or too little, but then giving people an opportunity to go through it in advance during the meeting.
sure.
This is very important,
Yeah.
because if you share it ahead of the meeting, nobody will do it because
No.
everybody's too busy. So you just kind of
Yeah.
like have to get into the meeting, and then you're like, now we're all gonna read.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna watch you read. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand that. Yeah, it's so interesting the way our brains all work, isn't it? Yeah, and I
Yeah.
can see exactly why it needs to be like that. Yeah, interesting. Maybe something for people to implement in their meetings.
I don't
I want to
know.
just you mentioned AI there, and obviously that's something that you and many other businesses all over the world in all different industries are looking to get to grips with more now. I wonder, in employer branding and in your world, what impact that's already having, and where you think maybe it's a challenge or an opportunity, or yeah, maybe if you could just share your thoughts on that as we sit in June or July 2024. Where are we at with it?
Yeah, I think it's quite funny in the beginning that you said that you feel that everybody's running past you when it comes
Yeah,
to the implementation of AI. But if you look under the hood, everybody's scrambling and trying to figure out what to hold
I
on to
think
first,
so.
right? Because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
angle is always like, okay, do we go for efficiency? Do we go for effectiveness? Do we automate things? Like everybody who I
Mm,
talk to is kind of like trying to prioritize. And within
mm,
BFT itself, I feel we obviously advise a lot of our customers and clients on the use and integration of Gen AI. It's basically one of our kind of like key priorities. And I think because we've invested in it, or the company's invested in it for a longer period of time, um, yeah, we come back with decent articles, decent reports. Like I would definitely check some out. And
Yeah,
one of the
cool.
things that I found interesting was an article that was published maybe beginning of this year in the Forbes,
Yeah. Hmm.
where we as a consulting firm participated in a research or a business study, basically looking at, can we as consultants be more effective, right? Because this is a thing. If you have Gen AI, you could basically put in your client case, then get an answer. So,
Yeah.
what's then the added value of the consultant? And you could challenge that.
Mm.
So the study basically concluded that it was a double-edged sword in a way that, yes, we were able to complete more tasks and do it faster. I think even by
Hmm.
40%, which is quite a
Wow.
lot, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But then the question is, does it still maintain the same quality? Because within
Mm.
that efficiency gain, we also found that, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think like 15 or 20% of all the cases that were kind of worked through included more errors. So then it's kind of
Right.
like, what do you go for, right? Do you go for quality versus quantity?
Mm.
And yeah, so that's one of the angles that I kind of like took up and was like, okay, so if we want to automate something within my team, what do we do? Because we have our own workspace within ChatGPT, and I think
Okay.
50% of all the supporting functions that we have within the consulting firm are also supported and using Gen AI actively. Like we have demo
Okay.
days. We kind of like, also are very focused on the ethical use and privacy, because obviously, not maybe the what's it called, the operational functions, but also the
Of course.
consultants,
Yeah, yeah.
need to be very cautious and careful with how we're using this. But
Yeah.
we get a lot of, or we like, there's a lot of offering and training on like prompt engineering skills, or
Hmm.
kind of like, what can you share, what is a good solution, how do you make decisions, etc.
Hmm.
So that's kind of, I think, the general approach. And then I feel within like my team, when it comes to creative approach, there are two angles, right? So on one hand, I think, and this is what I've seen in marketing and what I really want to pull in employer branding, is that,
Yeah.
with the support of Gen or of AI, predictive AI, you
Hmm.
could, enhance personalization and kind of like, really focus on that engagement and that candidate experience, which is something that,
Yeah.
is based on data, and which I really like. And, like 5 years ago, I would have said, just give me an Excel with like 1,000 fields, and I would just go through on my own, like on a Friday afternoon, just drinking a tea and being like, okay, what are all
Yeah.
the connections? Now I can just upload this in ChatGPT and be like, okay, and just ask a bunch of questions, right? So I think that that is
Mm.
super cool on the predictive side, but it's just not happening as much, because you should also like still sanitize the data, and kind of like
Oh,
what we said in the beginning, like pulling all these sources together in one and then uploading it into an open AI. Yeah, it's just, I think we're not there yet, but I would love to. Within
yeah.
BCG, they developed a kind of like platform that should potentially offer this, but that's more on the client side. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, how can we potentially use that? But
Yeah. How
then,
can we have one on our side? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I'm always trying to cross that bridge a little bit. And
Mm.
then, I think for the creative part, working with generative AI, I'm very actively working with my team to see what we could change, as in like, the basics from like copywriting. But then you also have to think about, the copywriting rights. Like if, for
Yeah.
example, if we produce an image, do we do it with DALI? Do we do it with Adobe? Like what has the lowest risk, more or less?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
These are things to
Yeah.
think through. Um, but yeah, I believe that there is a big opportunity there. Thinking like, support when it comes to text to voice, making things more accessible for,
Yeah.
to be more inclusive in a way, or
Yeah.
generating videos. This is something that I would love to
Mm.
do. But then I'm looking at how the video generators are working. And I feel that there's still some, like it's still an AI, you see it. And I'm kind of like
Yeah.
waiting for that company that's not making it
Yeah.
visible that it's an AI. But I am truly trying to anticipate on it, because I also feel, yeah, if we're going to produce everything with, AI, as when it comes to creatives, or I mean, maybe even just generate ideas, like creative concepts, like what
Yeah,
does
absolutely.
how should my team prepare for this, like, and I
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
want them to kind of like invest in preparing themselves, because if you're a content marketer, I think that the only thing you should do right now is basically focusing on how can you take all these tools and be the best AI marketer you
Ah,
can, because otherwise,
yeah. Yeah.
what will happen to your job, potentially? I don't know, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just trying to anticipate where possible. Um, I do feel that, yeah, we can do more, because I'm
Yeah.
also afraid that everybody else is doing more. But yeah,
Yeah.
you never know.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I think when I moved to London, I was following a few courses at the time where I was already looking at the effect of AI and machine learning on marketing theories, and this is like 5 years
Yes.
ago, right? And then
Yeah.
I was in a class with my peers, and we were talking about things that 30% at that time of the images that were used in advertising globally, 30% was
Wow.
already AI generated. And this is
Wow.
5 years ago, right? So
Yeah.
I think that there's still like a big gap between what's accessible to the public and what
Mm.
is possible, and how much funds you have, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
yeah, I think opportunity, and I just want to make sure that we kind of anticipate on time. I can't be too
Yeah.
early adapter, if that's even a word, adapting. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I understand completely. I think sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming with where to start because there are so many options and so many kind of new ways that AI is being used.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you can get caught in the trap of every single new thing that comes down the conveyor belt thinking, well, why don't we try that? Why don't we try that? And then
Yeah.
that feels like a lot of wasted energy. So I completely relate to that feeling of waiting for the thing to come along. Oh, this is going to be the AI solution for us. But I think
Yeah.
it's a bit of trial and error, and it's a bit of the solutions improving as they already have done, and as they will continue to do so. But also us getting better. I mean, we're very new to being people who use AI. We haven't grown up with that skill, so we're having to learn how to best adopt it, how to, like you say, for SEO or content marketers. That's a whole nother skill now that they must learn. And
Yeah.
I think that to be open-minded to it is the key. I think, well, we spoke a little bit before about people being worried about it, taking their jobs, things like that. I think really that's the wrong mindset to have. It's actually how can this help me? How can actually I adopt it, and how can we work together in a way, thinking of it as a thing,
Yeah.
to take my role and my industry to the next level. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
exciting, and
I
I think that
definitely.
creative side of it with the video and everything, that I mean that's mind blowing, really, isn't it? And I think the potential for
Yeah.
that is just
But
crazy.
I get what you're saying, and I feel that a lot of people, especially last year when the whole kind of like hype started, people were
Yeah.
afraid to like, lose their jobs or the world will change forever, yada yada. I felt that we were back in like a 2000 millennial crisis. But anyway, like how I see it now is, I try to, with every activity that we do or every project, I just try to see it as okay, this can help us to optimize or to do things more
Mm,
fast or anything else. But I also kind of like try to see it as a gift in a way that we can focus on like higher value tasks, like if the content is created by an AI, or at least a copy, and we feel that it's good and it's working, right? And the data shows it. Like, what can we focus on? How can we increase that engagement with the candidate? How can we make it
mm,
even more personal? Like, there's other things that you always want to kind of like dig into, but you can't really,
mhm.
because you have your,
Yeah.
basic, almost I would say, admin tasks.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what I also find interesting is because you were saying that obviously kind of like we all need to adapt and learn. But then I talked to my cousins who are, just out of university, like 21 and 24 or something. And they just, for them, it's so normal to work with,
Yeah.
search apps, or if they want to figure anything out, like I go to Google and they go to ChatGPT. And then I feel
Yeah.
very old saying that. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's so, they're so used to oh yeah, I need this. Oh yeah, let me create that with ChatGPT. And it goes from like travel itineraries to, I don't know, like things for social media channels. It's just, it's
Yeah.
so embedded in their daily life already. Um,
Mm.
yeah, that also
That's
kind of like, you know, shocked me. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it
I
is,
should
and
step
it
my
just
game up.
shows how infiltrated it already is. That's kind of sounds the wrong word to use, but
Yeah,
and I guess that's what happens generationally, doesn't it? And I guess that likewise that these sorts of conversations always make you feel old, don't they? But I guess that's the sort of thing that just as time marches on, things like that
yeah,
do just become more central and more embedded, and less of a, oh, there's a new thing we must implement. It's just the way of working naturally. It's just the way I approach normal tasks in life. And
yeah,
just what you said there around the admin task, someone on a previous podcast said something about AI, which I thought was fantastic and completely relates, in that he refers to AI, or the jobs that he gives to AI as like the dishwasher jobs, because the dishwasher does exactly that. It kind of takes away the really menial tasks and allows you to
yeah,
spend your time making the MasterChef meal in your kitchen or burning it if
yeah.
you're like me. So I think that that's a good way of thinking about it, at least for now. So yeah, with the time has marched on. I feel like it's such an interesting discussion. I could talk for ages and hear more about the different places you've worked
Yeah, have a good
and all
time.
the approaches. It's really appreciate you sharing your insight, and thank you.
Sure.
I always like to end off with one final question before we finish. If it hadn't been employer branding, if it hadn't been anything to do with this world, what do you think you would have done, as a role? Maybe when you were younger, what did you always dream of being? Or was there something else that you considered going into? Or was it always going to be recruitment, employer branding?
I think this is hilarious because I always kind of like ask and share this insight with all of my like close friends, and now I'm going to share it in this podcast. So I
Okay.
think, you don't, you never wake up, at least as far as I have people around me, and think I'm going to be a recruiter when I grow up, right? Like it doesn't happen. I
Okay.
think, but I think that these people that are all in recruiting, like they have a certain
Mm.
drive that is connecting them with trying to, facilitate, bring other people something that supports them, So I feel it's a caring background. And I think
Mm.
that whole experience creational element is something that is really in my core. But if I wouldn't be in employer branding, and I always say that maybe I'm going to do this when I'm old, is I would probably open like a beach bar, and then I'll serve
Oh,
people
wow.
breakfast in the morning with some like nice sandwiches, and then I'll offer some yoga sessions. I close in the afternoon, and then I'll do some cocktails until like 8, and then I'll just
Nice.
and I'm like, I think that
No
that would be
way.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel
That's
it's
so
so
good.
funny because it's so the opposite of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that that is, and that's also in a way like facilitating, and giving people an experience, but
Yes,
just in
absolutely.
a different way.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I hope you get to do it at some point. We'll all come
Yeah,
along. We'll
well,
listen to the podcast. We'll come along to the beach bar.
I think that if anybody wants to support that business idea, that they should reach out to me. I
Yeah,
have some info
yeah,
for
yeah.
you. I am ready.
Drop a comment below.
Yes. That
Oh,
would be
no,
cool.
that's lovely. Well, a very nice vision to end on, and I hope you make it one day. But meanwhile, it sounds like you're doing a fantastic job, and we'll definitely be kind of tuning into the things that you're doing and taking a look at a BCG, and yeah, learning from what you guys are implementing. And yeah, really appreciate you sharing your story. So thank you very much. We'll end it
Yeah.
there. Lovely to meet you, and have a great
Thanks for
rest of your
having me.
day. Thank
Okay,
you. Thanks,
thanks.
Modiara.